Streaming live. The leader in Internet talk radio. VoiceAmerica.com.
Welcome to Crime Prevention 101 with host Susan Bartelstone. We're so happy you've joined us this weekend. Over the next hour, you'll learn the tips, tricks, and vital information that'll help you keep yourself confident and safe. Now, here's the host of Crime Prevention 101, Susan Bartelstone.
Hello, and welcome to Crime Prevention 101. This is the personal safety radio show with an optimistic perspective on a sober subject, and it is my great honor and privilege and pleasure to be with you here once again on this Saturday. And I hope you had a safe week since we were together last. Now, you know, March is Women's History Month, and in fact, tomorrow, this Sunday, is International Women's Day. And my guest today, Linda Fairstein, who was a prosecutor and the chief of the Sex Crimes Prosecution Unit in the Manhattan DA's office for 25 of her 30 years there. But she has broken so much ground for women in the criminal justice field that I think she ought to be an honorary member in some construction workers union at this point. She is one of my absolute heroes. And back in the day when I was but a lowly self-defense instructor, schlepping all over New York City, doing my classes, she was out there putting away those bad guys. And she prosecuted some really famous cases, like the Preppy Murder Case. You've all heard of Robert Chambers, I'm sure. Most of us certainly have. The Central Park Jogger case, we're going to talk about some of those cases. But even more importantly, she had a tremendous impact on the way sex crimes and domestic violence cases are treated by the legal system today and how these crimes are prosecuted. And I'm going to be talking to her about that. She's considered one of America's foremost legal experts on sexual abuse and domestic violence. She's all over the media. I've seen her in tons of places. And in 2002, she retired, and she became a best-selling author. She's now written 11 in a series of crime novels about a hard-boiled, Manhattan prosecutor. We're going to talk about her book. She's got a new one coming out, Lethal Legacy. Linda, welcome to Crime Prevention 101.
What a great introduction, Susan. We're going to eat up the hour. Thank you for being so gracious. And I really admire what you're doing and the reach you're getting with this show, and I'm delighted to be here.
Oh, thank you so much. No, it really is a pleasure, as I said. Now, Linda, I know that New York City defense attorneys used to call you hell on heels when they had to face you in court, and that's because you had what they called a hard-boiled man, or we just call it tough, and you had this ability to win hopeless cases. But did you know that you also had an effect on the linguistic system? The words rough sex, defense, and wolfpack came from your days as a prosecutor.
Well, rough sex, yes. 2 words I regret. They were actually, my adversary used that expression at the arraignment of Robert Chambers in 1980. Mm-hmm. And when in fact, as proved through the evidence of the case by both sides, I mean, that was not actually an issue. And yet those 2 words, especially in the tabloid headlines, were used over and over and over again so much that they really did enter the lexicon and later became, sadly, in many other cases where the victim was blamed for her own death, they became sort of a legal jargon catch term. So you're absolutely right.
Indeed. Well, we're going to talk about some of those cases. So let's go back a little bit. Talk a little bit about when you first started in the DA's office and what it was like for women prosecutors back then.
Good question. Such a different time for everybody in the system. As many of your listeners will know, I mean, it was the same in many careers. But I went to college and went straight to law school, got out in 1972, and came to the Manhattan DA's office. It's what I wanted to do. It was a way of doing public service, which very much interested me. The DA, as some of your listeners are way too young to remember, was Frank Hogan. He was really a great legend in law enforcement. And he had a very different attitude about women in the workplace, did not think we belonged there. There were about 200 assistant DAs, lawyers, in the office under Mr. Hogan, and only 7 were women. He really didn't like them in the criminal justice system. He didn't like them dealing with the most serious cases, so we were not allowed to handle violent crimes, certainly not murder. There were very, very few sexual assault prosecutions because the laws in America were so bad. So that's not why I went there. And I went to be part of his great legal staff, but women were assumed to be taking places in the law library and doing the more gentrified work, legal research and brief writing. When Mr. Hogan died 2 years later, Bob Morgenthau, who's still the district attorney, just announced
Indeed.
he'll not run again, but he had a very different attitude. He'd worked in a very diverse way in the criminal justice system as a federal prosecutor, and he's the one who asked me to take over the newly formed Sex Crimes Prosecution Unit. It was the first of its kind in the country. It was, in ways I didn't even have the foresight to think about then. It became groundbreaking because really the work that the feminist movement had done, it was not, sadly, it was not the criminal justice system, was not judges and prosecutors who said, we need to reform this. It's not fair for women who've been victims of sexual assault. So we began to break ground, change laws, legislate for new ways to handle these cases, and create entirely different methods to handle them. And again, this is 15 years before I ever heard DNA, what I like to say are my three favorite letters of the alphabet.
Yeah, actually, and I was out there fighting that fight along with you and some of those grassroots organizations. I mean, back in those days, we had a system where you needed corroboration in order to even bring a rape case. You needed a witness, that women's words were not believed.
You're good. I mean, you don't even hear the word corroboration today. And young lawyers who come to the practice who are so spoiled by these changes don't know. I mean, it's a wonderful point you make. Corroboration really required in the law, in the written law, that there had to be independent evidence of a woman's word in a rape case only. It was the only crime that required it before you could go forward. So it really prevented the overwhelming number of victims from ever having a day in court.
That didn't change until into the 70s, correct?
That's correct.
Before we...
in part for the first laws, and a little bit later with other cases, and still was required for child victims. So it was a very, very slow process of changing laws, and changing attitudes, as you probably know, is as difficult as changing laws. I mean, that was the way it had always been. So many, many people would say, it's not enough. Where's the extra evidence? Where's the proof that she said that this happened? I mean, proof that you didn't need in any other category of crime. You would have the victim testify, of course, and she'd be tested. She'd be cross-examined by the defense attorney, but without corroboration of specific elements of the crime, who the attacker was, whether there was physical evidence in days when we did not have evidence collection kits, and forensics was not what TV shows and crime fiction make it today. Evidence of the force. All these things, three things, had to be proved in every case. So the year before I got to the office, one of the first times the New York Times covered the issue of sexual assault, Martha Lear, a reporter, wrote a story in which the fact cited was that more than 1,000 men had been arrested in New York City for sexual assault, only 18 of them convicted.
Wow.
So just shocking. I mean, that's what I walked into at that point in time.
And there was another area that you also had a big impact, and that was the fact that women's sexual history was deemed fair game up until, I think, it was also the 70s. If she wasn't a nun, just stepped foot out of the convent, if she had had any kind of sexual past at all, that was looked upon as she probably did ask for the rape, or she was responsible for it in some way. Again, correct? That was another one of your battles that you had to...
Absolutely right. Started by a few of the lawyers who came before me, but the rape shield law, as they're called, prevented... I mean, when I started prosecuting, victims could be asked about their sexual history. Completely irrelevant. A man climbed through the fire escape to the bedroom window, and the defense attorney was allowed to ask that woman everything about her sexual history to try and prove that if she had been previously unchaste, as the British law was, then she was likely to consent even to a stranger who held her at knife point. Very, very absurd law and really terrifying. I mean, it kept a lot of women from coming forward. And the basis for it is, without joking, 17th century British case law, which basically regarded women as the chattel of their husbands. And so if there was any suggestion that there had been any kind of other sexual activity, then the woman was deemed not to have been raped. She would have consented to intercourse with anyone. It's chilling to read, to have the wisdom and maturity now, 30 years later, and go back and read what these laws were and see how they impacted women I met every day of the week.
We lived it, and we fought it.
Yes.
And in fact, exactly. And I remember reading an article you were quoted in where you were talking about a case that you had lost, and this goes back to the attitudes that the jury brought in. Those same attitudes. There was a case where a young woman who was raped in an elevator car, but one of the jurors wouldn't convict because she didn't believe you could actually have sex standing up. I mean, there was...
Absolutely. We actually won that case, but the jury was out for a very long time, and when we thought it was open and shut, what actually happened was that there was an off-duty police officer standing in the office building on Broadway waiting to take the elevator when the doors opened and this young woman got out, and the offender started to run, and the cop literally caught him fleeing the scene. And so it should have been an open and shut. That jury should have gone out, talked for 5 minutes, rang the buzzer, and come back in. And they went out overnight. And when the next day, when they convicted, and we said, what was it? 11 of the jurors said, we were ready to demonstrate with this guy, but he just simply refused to believe that she could have been raped standing up. I mean, the offender...
Unbelievable. Linda, that music means we're coming up on our break.
Thank you.
Let's take a pause. We will be right back.
News, opinion, your voice counts. Call toll-free 1-866-472-5787. 1-866-472-5787. VoiceAmerica.com. After more than 17 years' experience teaching safety skills to thousands of women and men, crime prevention and personal safety expert Susan Bartelstone concluded that by thinking and responding quickly, ideally within 20 seconds, potentially violent criminal encounters can be prevented. Using techniques from many different disciplines and illustrated by 60 real-life examples and success stories, Susan shows how it's done in her new book, Think Fast and Prevent a Violent Crime: How to Respond to Danger in 20 Seconds or Less. Check out www.fightsafe.com for more information. You'll also find information there on Susan's upcoming Crime Prevention 101 personal safety teleseminars. Think fast, talk fast, fight smart, which stress the many opportunities you have to deter or defuse a criminal encounter and how to use your brains instead of your muscles in a fight. Look for the new book information or sign up for Susan Bartelstone's personal safety seminars at www.fightsafe.com today.
Hi, my name is Aaron, and I'm a survivor of mannequinism. Mannequinism is basically when you turn into a hard plastic shell. They say it's from not being politically active. For me, it started when I didn't register to vote, and then I stopped volunteering, and before I knew it, I wasn't doing anything. And that's when I found a small patch of plastic on my right shoulder.
Protect yourself from mannequinism. Log on to fightmannequinism.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
The Interstate Sportsman Talk radio show brings two well-known outdoorsmen to the Voice America Network with hunting and fishing info news, talking about everything from new sporting gear, places to hunt and fish, and getting more from your recreation time. Join hosts Brock Ray and Don Kirk Friday mornings at 6 a.m. Pacific Time, 9 Eastern, for the Interstate Sportsman on the Voice America channel.
Streaming live, the leader in Internet talk radio, VoiceAmerica.com.
You're listening to Crime Prevention 101 with Susan Bartelstone. We invite you to share your stories, tips, or suggestions for topics you'd like us to cover, and Susan will address some of these on future shows. Send your story or idea to solutions@fightsafe.com. That email address again is solutions@fightsafe.com. Now back to Crime Prevention 101 with Susan Bartelstone.
Welcome back. And if you're just joining us, I am talking with former sex crimes prosecutor and best-selling author Linda Fairstein. And I just want to say at this point, as I always say, if you listening to me are already a survivor of the kinds of crimes that we're going to be talking about on today's show or anything else, please understand that nothing that happened to you was your fault. Even if you think that you used bad judgment in a situation and left yourself vulnerable, that is never, never, never an excuse for crime or for violence. And I also want you to know that there are no right or wrong responses. No, I should have done this or I should have done that. If you are alive, you responded absolutely correctly. And it is so important that you call yourself a survivor and not a victim, and that you understand that with proper professional help, you can put what happened to you in perspective and get on with your life. And if you'd like to know some resources, I've got some national resources on my DearSafetySolutions.com website. You can also email me, solutions@fightsafe.com, with any questions you have about anything, including where to get some help. So, Linda, welcome back.
Thank you.
I wanted to also talk about you and forensic science and technology. This became one of your most famous cases or infamous cases, the Robert Chambers Preppy Murder Case, and I think that this was figuring very heavily in that case. Am I right?
Yes, that was actually the first time, 1986, that as we began that investigation, that one of the medical examiners said to me, there's a very new cutting-edge forensic technique, DNA testing. You need to learn it. You need to know what it is. We actually tried to use it in that case, and unlike today, when I could take a blood sample and submit it to a lab and get a preliminary result tomorrow, it took 6 months to get a preliminary because only one lab in the US of A, at the FBI at Quantico, was doing DNA analysis. And no court in the country, including in our case, accepted it as a reliable technique. So although we had evidence in that case, a piece of clothing that we were able to prove through DNA was what the killer used to suffocate the victim in the case, Jennifer Levin. The jury was never allowed to hear that connection and hear that bit of scientific proof and hear our explanation of her death in that manner because the judge, after a very lengthy hearing, ruled that this DNA stuff was too new, too unreliable. It was never going to work. So it was not until it was useless in that case, although it helped confirm to us the culpability of the killer and how he did it. But it was not until 1989, 3 years later, that DNA was accepted for use in criminal courts in America.
Isn't that amazing to think about that? How do you think it would have impacted on the sentence of him if they had accepted it?
I think it would have impacted, ultimately in that case, the jury was not able to reach a decision, and the defendant pleaded guilty to manslaughter. And I think there was a much greater likelihood, had they heard the DNA evidence, had we been able to demonstrate the mechanism, had we been able to show Chambers' blood on the jacket. Jennifer was only bleeding from one place, which was her mouth, and it was DNA that identified those different blood types, and what blood typing couldn't do, was to identify the saliva from her mouth to show that the jacket had been used to smother her. And I think it would have been an entirely different outcome with a much longer sentence had we been able to prove that.
Well, thank goodness he is back in jail again, but it would have been nice if he had just stayed there.
Yes, it would have been much nicer had he been convicted of murder.
Indeed. Oh, Linda, we have a caller. We have our first caller. Let's take some questions. Bonnie, are you there? Okay, Okay, while we're trying to find her, let's talk very quickly about Bonnie. Do we have her?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, hi, Bonnie. Welcome. You have a question for Linda.
Yes. As founder of the website FamilyLawCourts.com, which is increasingly going to criminal courts, I'm wondering why DAs are not trusting juries and they're passing on cases that should have gone to trial, especially in domestic violence cases. They're saying. The second part is did the Supreme Court rule in Castle Rock versus Gonzalez in 2005 that police departments aren't legally required to enforce restraining orders? That drives me nuts.
Okay. In regard to your first question, I don't quarrel with it. I just don't know what jurisdiction you're talking about, because I think the way these cases are handled really depends on the individual jurisdiction and the advances made there. The 5 boroughs of New York, for example, I think have responded incredibly well. Judge Kaye, throughout the state of New York, initiated domestic violence courts that combine the criminal, the matrimonial, the child abuse, and child custody parts. And there have been some radical changes for the better for domestic violence survivors. I have no quarrel with you, and I should also say I'm on the board of an organization called Safe Horizon, which is the largest victim advocacy organization in the country that's worked very hard, has the best domestic violence shelters I've ever seen. They're not primitive. They're quite nice apartments that really are safe houses for victims and their families. Safe Horizon works very closely with the criminal justice system in all the 5 boroughs. Partners has just opened child advocacy centers where child victims of violence are seen once by the police.
It's not getting to the question.
Well, I'm getting to the question that I think I'm answering, that in many, many jurisdictions, these cases are taken to trial and are handled well, and that's something a lot of us fought for more than 30 years. So I don't know where you are. I'm happy to hear where you are, and if it's not working, let's get on it. There are a lot of agencies that can help get these cases to trial.
It's a national site, and I hear from women all over the place saying that the prosecutor said they need more because, frankly, their salaries, their bonuses, their salary increases are based on their conviction rate, and so they're not willing to take a case unless it's what they're sure is going to be successful. And this is showing a lack of regard or not trusting the jury system, that the jury can find their way there. They don't need every whiz-bang gizmo from CSI, but it's very frustrating. I also hear from a number of police ex-wives and estranged wives who can't get restraining orders. It seems like the judges are more concerned of the officer having a job than they are of the victim. And I hear this from all over the country.
We should link our sites, because this is a lot of what I do pro bono around the country. I try and get victims who complain about not getting access to the system, and we use it modeling on the places that have done it well. San Diego, California, for example, to get out of my own backyard.
I'm calling you from San Diego. It's very bad here.
Oh, Casey Gwynn has just done remarkable things in that office.
No. Casey Gwynn has he was profiled by. He was sued because one of his workers there was being harassed by her ex-husband, and he didn't attend to it. And that made major news here. It didn't make news nationally, but
thank you for telling me.
That lawsuit is on the website.
All over I'm happy. I thank you for that. I will look for that story. I didn't know that. I knew his pioneering work, and I am happy to work with you. When we get offline, I'll find your site and introduce myself. But you're right about the end result. We need to get more people there, and there are a lot of places that do it well. And Safe Horizon can help you with this. We counsel all over the country, and I agree with your point, and let's use the models that get people there.
Bonnie, thank you for calling. What's your website again? Because I did go to it, and it was very interesting and provocative. Give out the website, please.
Yes, it's called FamilyLawCourts.com. There's a section especially in the areas of the country where it seems especially bad is New York, California, Texas, Georgia. So I have special places on the site for that. And also, collectively, nationally, there's a section called Bad Cop, What You Gonna Do.
All right, so that's FamilyLawCourt.com. Thank you, Bonnie. I think you made a call to the right place here. Thank you so much.
I really take issue, though, with the problems in New York. We've seen such advances, and to have had a brilliant woman like Judith Kaye she just had to step down, but leading our highest court, and the innovative things she's done for domestic violence alongside my beloved Safe Horizon, it's just leap years ahead of most places in the country.
And I also know, Linda, that Casey Glynn, I interviewed him also on the show. I have a show back in my archives with him. They did amazing things out there. But, sometimes things slip through the cracks. We know it, but we've got people shining a light on it. And I think that's all we can hope for. Yes, right?
and there are, by people watching like Bonnie, shining a light on these problems, giving victims without voices a voice, which is what my colleagues and I try to do, get them into the system before they do slip completely through that crack. So your show can make it happen.
Well, that's what I'm doing it for too. I'm helping to hold that flashlight up there. Let's talk a little bit. I want to go back to one other case that also is extremely well known. You are the supervising over this. This was the Central Park Jogger case that has not gone away. You supervise the prosecution of that,
right?
From your unit, correct?
When you say it's not going away, I can't talk factually about it. There is still a lawsuit pending, and the city is we're very actively engaged in proving the facts of the case and the rightfulness of the original convictions. So when that's over, I'll give you the first up-close and exclusive, but we're about to start depositions in a few months, so I'm not allowed to talk about it.
Are you actually involved with this?
Oh, yes.
Can we at least talk about the background of what?
No, I can't discuss facts. I've got lawyers, and it just can't go there.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what. We're coming up on a break, so why don't we do this? Let's take the break now. We'll pause and we'll come back and we're going to talk more about your switch to best-selling author.
Okay.
Stay tuned.
News, opinion,
Can you hear me?
Your voice counts. Call toll-free 1-866-472-5787. 1-866-472-5787. VoiceAmerica.com. After more than 17 years' experience teaching safety skills to thousands of women and men, crime prevention and personal safety expert Susan Bartelstone concluded that by thinking and responding quickly, ideally within 20 seconds, potentially violent criminal encounters can be prevented. Using techniques from many different disciplines and illustrated by 60 real-life examples and success stories, Susan shows how it's done in her new book, Think Fast and Prevent a Violent Crime: How to Respond to Danger in 20 Seconds or Less. Check out www.fightsafe.com for more information. You'll also find information there on Susan's upcoming Crime Prevention 101 personal safety teleseminars. Think fast, talk fast, fight smart, which stress the many opportunities you have to deter or defuse a criminal encounter and how to use your brains instead of your muscles in a fight. Look for the new book information or sign up for Susan Bartelstone's personal safety seminars at www.fightsafe.com today.
What's it like?
What's it like?
It's lonely.
It's really lonely.
I miss my brother.
I miss my brother.
I'm surrounded by other people, but it's not the same.
I've got other people around me, but it's not the same.
It's pretty scary, but I don't let it rattle me.
It's pretty scary around here, but I don't let it rattle me.
You always have to watch your back.
There's no one to watch my back.
I spend my whole day worried who's out to get me.
I'm always wondering who's out to get me.
But I can take care of myself.
But I can take care of myself.
No matter what, I'll keep my head up.
No matter what, I'll keep my head up.
It's not like I have a choice.
It's not like I have a choice.
This'll all be over in 5 years, 3 months, and 17 days.
This will all be over in 5 years, 3 months, and 17 days.
Go to jail for a gun crime and your family serves a sentence with you. Something to think about before committing a gun crime. Gun crimes hit home. This message brought to you by Project Safe Neighborhoods and the Ad Council.
the Internet's #1 talk station. #1 talk station. VoiceAmerica.com.
You're listening to Crime Prevention 101 with Susan Bartelstone. We invite you to share your stories, tips, or suggestions for topics you'd like us to cover, and Susan will address some of these on future shows. Send your story or idea to solutions@fightsafe.com. That email address again is solutions@fightsafe.com. Now back to Crime Prevention 101 with Susan Bartelstone.
Welcome back. And if you are just joining us, this is Crime Prevention 101. I'm Susan Bartelstone. I'm talking with former sex crimes prosecutor and best-selling author Linda Fairstein. If you missed the first part of this show, please go to my host page on the voiceamerica.com website. You just are not going to want to miss this show. It has been fabulous and amazing up to this point, talking with Linda. Now, we were talking in the first part of the show about her groundbreaking work as a prosecutor in the district attorney's office in Manhattan. And I want to switch now, and I want to talk about her writing career and she's a best-selling author of 11 crime novels about a hard-hitting Manhattan district attorney, Alexandra Cooper. Linda, of course, I got to ask this, you know that. How did this switch come about? How did you become a writer?
What I always wanted to do, Susan, growing up and looking at any yearbook, was be a writer. I wanted to write. My father, whom I adored, used to say to me, "You have nothing to write about. Get a job." He worried that I would not be able to support myself. And so public service was my second interest. I went through college as an English lit major and had visions of being in a garret somewhere, writing stories and poems. And my father said, "Get real." So when I got to the DA's office, I must say I never abandoned the dream of writing, but figured it would be something I'd do long after I retired. In the mid-1980s, actually right around the time DNA was introduced to the system, a publisher asked me to write a book about all the things we talked about in the first segment, the changes in law, rape shield, corroboration, and what we'd done in Manhattan that was so pioneering. And Bob Morgenthau gave me permission to write that book. I procrastinated. It came out in 1993. But once I realized I could discipline myself to do that, to write a book and keep the day job that I loved so much, then I decided to start writing novels. And so the first 4 crime novels about a prosecutor, as I often say, who was younger, thinner, blonder, but who was facing many of the same issues and handling the special victims cases, I wanted to write to entertain, of course, but to educate about these things that were changing so rapidly in the law and making life better, really, making it able for victims to triumph in the system that had so long been unfriendly. So the writing was just a dream delayed, and for quite a while I did both jobs together. And in 2002, it was 30 years in the DA's office, and I thought time to step aside, spend more time with my husband, my family, and devote myself to writing. But I miss the DA's office every day, and I stay very close to this work by consulting all around the country with prosecutors and victims on cases and trying to get access to the system.
Oh, and I certainly do see you all over the media too, which is fantastic to do. So now let's talk a little bit about, you've got a new book is just out, you were telling me. It's
just out, yes.
And just hitting the New York Times bestseller list.
This weekend, yes. Thank you.
Lethal Legacy. And now talk a little about Lethal Legacy.
Sure. It's the 11th book in my series of crime novels. You can start anywhere. Alex Cooper is the prosecutor, and she's got 2 very smart, funny detectives who keep her grounded and help her do the work. They're sort of composites of the best and brightest of the guys I worked with. And this one is my sort of self-branding is to take some place in New York City, some institution that I love, usually some place that looks very refined and safe and benign from the outside, but when you scratch the surface, there's a little more interesting history, and it's often a dark history. With this book, I've always loved the New York Public Library. It's not a lending library for your readers who aren't familiar with it. It's a research library, so it's just one of the great cultural institutions in New York. It's that beautiful building on Fifth Avenue that stretches for 2 blocks, 40 to 42nd, with those very iconic grand library lions that guard its front steps. And it just has some of the world's great treasures. 100 years old. It's got the first Gutenberg Bible brought to America, rare books and manuscripts that are centuries old, a magnificent map division with some of the rarest maps in the world. And interestingly enough, there have been a number of thefts from the library. There are very, very things worth millions of dollars. There are very generous trustees and patrons of the library, but there's a lot of greed there as well. People who find treasures donated a century ago by the Astor family, for example, and someone says, well, if it's not on display, why can't I own it and possess it and have it in my home? So there are a lot of motives for murder and treacherous things that go on there, and I had great fun not only doing the research amidst these treasures, but plotting the evil deeds.
Ah, that sounds amazing.
It's great fun. They gave me incredible access. I sort of was afraid that it would be much too grand and literary there, but I was really taken under the wing of one of the heads of the library who reads crime fiction, and I think in these difficult times when libraries so desperately need the funding, I love being able to call attention to the good things that are there, and you can tour the library twice a day. We may actually start an Alex Cooper crime tour of some of the deadlier places within the library. But it was
they should, just like that Dan Brown Vatican tour.
That's
that
right. That's
I
what I'm
love
hoping.
it. I'm signing up immediately.
I'll take you myself.
Oh, anytime. Let's talk off air. All right, Linda, we've got another caller for you.
Sure.
Bud, can we put Bud on, please?
Yeah, hi, Linda. How you doing?
Hi, Bud. Good.
Belanich.
How are you?
Bud Belanich, Linda Fairstein. You're a fan.
Well, cool. I'm actually sitting here holding Lethal Legacy.
Good.
I have 90-year books in cloth, first editions. I got to go look for the other two. I loved it because I love the public library. But I also was interested in some of the stuff that you do and that you've written about with sex crimes. And there are so many issues that, we hear about registered offenders and things like that. And I'm wondering, do these programs work? Are people sort of habitual, or can people actually be sex crime predators actually be rehabilitated?
Good, serious questions that Susan and I can address. Starting backwards, there are some programs that work. I think most people who've worked in this field now will agree that there are many sexual predators, especially child molesters and serial rapists, stranger rapists, who are absolutely resistant. There is no known therapy that has worked to treat them. And my belief that when properly convicted, when arrested and properly convicted, that they need to be isolated from society for as long as the sentences allow. Are there cases, and we've just talked about domestic violence, I'm writing a piece right now for an online site about Rihanna and Chris Brown. You look at the face of this young singer and think, if this had happened to someone you loved and the assailant had been a stranger, neither she nor anyone she knew would want anything but an arrest, a conviction, and serious jail time. And the dynamic is so different in many instances, sadly, when it's an intimate partner. So you already hear her talking about reuniting with him. Are there batterers programs that work? Again, yes, Safe Horizon has a program for batterers. Some respond. Sometimes if you get a guy on the first offense or second offense, and he understands what's at risk for him, and not only losing the relationship, but possibly jail, there are people who are capable, I think, of responding. But many, many predators, far many more predators, I think, are just beyond any method that we know to change their behavior.
But that's also been my experience as well, and all the research that I've done is that there is almost no known treatment for that will really be effective.
And Susan, I just tell you,
here in Denver, there's big issues with registered sex offenders living, like within a block of a school and all. And I just wonder if that type of a program is even effective at all, and if, in fact, these people are really dangerous to these children. And I guess what I'm hearing you say is yes.
News is not good on this one, Bud.
Right. And these registration programs are really relatively new. Most of them started in the 90s, and boy, has it been a hard learning curve for governments, law enforcement, police. Some of these offenders, would move out and literally get apartments. They'd register, but they'd get apartments overlooking the elementary school or the Boy Scout field. And so some very hard lessons have resulted in just attempts to revise that and put teeth in these very new laws. But I would say it's been a very slow, difficult, unsuccessful process for the most part to date.
Mm-hmm. Well, and to change the subject just for a minute, the New York. I used to live in the city, and the New York Public Library, that main reading room, is truly one of my very favorite places in the world, and you do such a good job of describing it.
Thank you.
And I did know that it was on the site of a reservoir, but I did not know that the Bryant Park site was a potter's field.
And I didn't know it either. And, of course, as you know from reading the books, my cop, Mike Chapman, is very smart, and he's a Fordham grad and a history buff. So I learn a lot of things through his eyes. And the idea that park, when I came to criminal justice in 1972, was a real needle park. It was one of the most dangerous places in the city.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's been gentrified magnificently, concerts in the summer and little European-looking, Parisian-looking gardens and book readings and signings. But it has a very dark history. It was a Revolutionary War battlefield, so Mike Chapman knew that. And then so many bodies just fell there during the war, that revolution, that it became a potter's field. So part of what I love in giving the readers these books is doing the research myself, because I learned so much about the city, and then try to layer it in the stories. And that reading room on my website, which is just my name, the library let us in to do a 3-minute video, sort of a quick tour of some of the places I write about. And you can see that beautiful reading room, magnificently restored. Looks kind of like a Renaissance palace, I think, when you're in there, right on my site. So thank you, Bud, for talking about it.
Well, Mike and Mercer are very interesting characters, and I figured they were composites. I heard you say that earlier.
Yes.
And I like the way you weave in the Jeopardy questions for the trivia. Your books truly are. I'm a big crime fiction buff, and your books, you always tell a good story, and they're quite enlightening in terms of little things that I pick up along the way. And sometimes I even look for some of the restaurants that you talk about.
They're all real. I think she has to eat somewhere, so she might as well eat in my favorite restaurant. So go to Paola, go to
do me a favor. Next time, go to dinner at Cafe Loop at 6th Avenue and 13th in the Village. That's one of my favorite places in the city.
All right, I'll throw that. I'll give them a try and put it in.
Okay.
Thanks, Bud.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much. I'm going to have to try Cafe Loop myself.
Oh, it's a wonderful place. It's on 13th Street, just west of 6th Avenue.
Great.
All right. So you are in New Yorker. That's fantastic.
Yep.
Thank you very much, Bud.
Bye.
I feel like I've missed out on a lot of good restaurants, but Linda, let's take a pause here. When we come back, we'll finish up with talking about the book and where people can get it and what's coming up for you.
Good. Thank you, Susan.
Talk. That's all we do is talk. If you'd like to talk, call us toll-free right now at 1-866-472-5787. 1-866-472-5787.
That's it.
VoiceAmerica.com. After more than 17 years' experience teaching safety skills to thousands of women and men, crime prevention and personal safety expert Susan Bartelstone concluded that by thinking and responding quickly, ideally within 20 seconds, potentially violent criminal encounters can be prevented. Using techniques from many different disciplines and illustrated by 60 real-life examples and success stories, Susan shows how it's done in her new book, Think Fast and Prevent a Violent Crime: How to Respond to Danger in 20 Seconds or Less. Check out www.fightsafe.com for more information. You'll also find information there on Susan's upcoming Crime Prevention 101 personal safety teleseminars. Think fast, talk fast, fight smart, which stress the many opportunities you have to deter or defuse a criminal encounter and how to use your brains instead of your muscles in a fight. Look for the new book information or sign up for Susan Bartelstone's personal safety seminars at www.fightsafe.com today. Stimulating talk.
It gets those synapses in the brain firing really fast.
All the time. The #1 Internet talk station where your opinion counts. VoiceAmerica.com.
You're listening to Crime Prevention 101 with Susan Bartelstone. We invite you to share your stories, tips, or suggestions for topics you'd like us to cover, and Susan will address some of these on future shows. Send your story or idea to solutions@fightsafe.com. That email address again is solutions@fightsafe.com. Now back to Crime Prevention 101 with Susan Bartelstone.
Welcome back, and I'm speaking with Linda Fairstein, former sex crimes prosecutor, groundbreaking sex crimes prosecutor, and best-selling author. And we're talking about Lethal Legacy, her latest book that's coming out. And tell me about what's coming up for you next, and how can people get this book, and give me all the websites and everything.
Okay. The book is available in bookstores everywhere. It, as you kindly said, hits the New York Times list this weekend. Every bookstore has it, the chains, the wonderful independents, online, Amazon, BNN.com. Go to my website, check out more about it if you are hesitant to order. Libraries, of course, have it. And I'm still in the middle of the book tour. I go to Palm Beach to do a big speech, actually, about domestic abuse on Wednesday at the Kravis Center there, which is also a book signing, and lots of events that you'll find on my website throughout the spring. Editing next year's book, which doesn't have a name yet, but Cooper's 12th Adventure is done. I'm doing some crime writing now I'm going to start with a piece on Monday on the Daily Beast, Tina Brown's website, writing about real cases, real crimes, and suggestions about either exposing parts of them or suggestions about what should be done in the system.
Now, what's the website address on that one? So people
mine is www.lindafairstein.com, and Monday I'll be on...
Wait, let me just spell it for him. It's FAIRSTEIN.
Correct.
LindaFairstein.com, and the one you're going to be posting on?
Monday I'll be posting a story about Rihanna and Chris Brown and the similarities to the Nicole Brown and O.J. Simpson escalating domestic violence case, and that will be on thedailybeast.com.
So you got another book coming up. How about, when can we expect Alexander Cooper movie or TV special? Or
from your mouth, as they say. I would really love, that. I actually have, usually when one of my books comes out, there's a flurry of interest. You get some calls from Hollywood. I had a conversation yesterday afternoon, with two gentlemen who want to come to town. They have an idea about buying the series, and I've come close before, just never gotten there. So I would love it. You have anybody listening who is a movie producer, call me. Let's go. But I'd very much like to see it on the screen. I think it would be great fun and a good series and a good chance for a good vehicle for one of the bright young actresses, and
Anyone particular in mind? Maybe she listens.
Right. Well, there are so many Kates out there, all those wonderful young Kates who kept getting awards, Winslet and Blanchett and whoever else, Beckinsale. I must say I was thoroughly taken with Anne Hathaway when I watched the Oscars. And,
you'd have to go blonde, though.
Right, I know. She might have to streak the front of it or something. Figure it out, but open to all ideas.
Well, if not the movies, at least a movie of the week on TV, a Lifetime movie, something.
My first book was Final Jeopardy was an ABC movie of the week starring Dana Delaney. It does appear on Lifetime and USA every month or so. You can find it, and they actually did a fairly good job with it. But then I bought the option back. Things changed on TV, as you may know, and they were doing less movies and more, unfortunately, reality shows. And so it was going to be 4 years before the next one was made, so I bought the rights back. But I'd be happy with a good TV show. They've done well with Kathy Reich's show Bones. She's another crime novelist, so I'd have a very good time with that. Thank you.
Okay, Lifetime, if you're there, we want to see her. We want Alexandra Cooper at least on that TV.
Thank
Can
you.
you give us a little bit of a hint about the next book coming up?
Yes, it was impossible. Delighted to be in New York this year and not take note of all the scandals that involve politicians. So I sort of go into New York and a little bit of political history. City Hall, one of our most magnificent buildings, which was constructed in 1802 and the only city hall in America still used for its original purpose and gloriously restored. But also there are only 3 federal houses still standing, mansions, wooden mansions, standing in Manhattan from that period, and they've all got a political history. One is Gracie Mansion, of course, where the mayor is supposed to live, but since our mayors don't live there, lots of bad things could happen at night. And Alexander Hamilton's home, the Grange, is also a magnificent mansion. And Aaron Burr lived in the Jumel Mansion, which is in Harlem Heights, one of the most beautiful houses in the city, has garden tours and music events in the summer. So I've got a true political scandal that happened with all these men in 1800. It was a murder case that had to do with Gracie and his mansion, and Hamilton and Burr were the defense attorneys. And I sort of tie that to a very current murder. So it's political history and scandal in New York.
This sounds amazing. I can't wait. I'm going to look for Lethal Legacy myself. Linda, I want to thank you so very much for being a guest on my show. And it was just an absolute pleasure to have you.
Delighted to talk to you, but thank you for your show. Thank you for what you're doing for everybody in this country. It's really a great service. And fun.
No, as I say, it's my honor and my privilege and my deep pleasure. So thank you. And all right, we are coming down to the last part of the show. I just want to remind you that if you'd like to hear any of the past episodes of Crime Prevention 101, just go to my webpage, my host page on the voiceamerica.com website, and all the shows are archived there on that website. And I also archive all the shows on my own personal website, dearsafetysolutions.com, so you can find it there as well. And if you do go to my dearsafetysolutions.com website, you're going to see that I'm going to be posting a link to Linda Fairstein's website, so you'll be able to find information about how to buy that book right there from my website. And also, while you're there, make sure you check out my safety tips page. I've got all sorts of tips and other good stuff that you might find very helpful on, and I've got a list of resources. If you're looking for good programs, I'm going to put a list to SafeHorizons.org, which is a New York organization, but it's a model for the way that crime victims can be helped. If you've got a personal safety question for me that you'd like me to answer, please email me at solutions@fightsafe.com, and I will be happy to talk about to either email you privately or maybe have you come and call into the show. I'd also like to hear your comments on the shows. I get so many emails, and I love it. Check me out on my Facebook page, Susan Bartelstone. It's Bartelstone. I'm there, and I've got all sorts of good stuff that I'm posting on my Facebook account, so don't forget to check that out. You can be my friend on Facebook. Don't you love it? And again, if you have got suggestions for shows or comments for shows, I'm really happy to talk to you about it. Next week, I'm going to be talking with Rita Smith, who is the Executive Director of the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence. I've had a number of shows on domestic violence. They're all archived. We're going to be talking about the issue of parental alienation syndrome and how that figures in child custody cases where there's domestic violence as an issue or abuse as an issue. You're not going to want to miss this show. In fact, it'd be a crime not to listen. So you know what? Stay tuned and stay safe.
We hope you got some useful information and inspiration this week on Crime Prevention 101. Susan Bartelstone invites you to join us again next Saturday at 11 a.m. Pacific Time and 2 p.m. Eastern Time here on Voice America. Have a great weekend and a safe weekend.